with the proliferation of journals we have in every domain, and with the limited amount of time that the prospective readers have, they often decide the quality of research based on the abstract. An abstract is like the facade of a building. It can be related to a movie or a book teaser. The essence of a 2-hour movie is distilled into 2 or 3 minutes. So too, the essence of your 8,000 word research paper needs to be crystallized into 200 to 250 words. Hence, writing an abstract is absolutely challenging. You have to spend a lot of time building it brick by brick. From the reader's perspective, from the editor's perspective, even from the peer reviewer's perspective, it's the first thing they read. So it has to be really appealing and precise. So you need to be really bang on. What is the ideal length of an abstract? See, APA recommends 150 to 200 words. But there are no hard and fast rules. It is better to adhere to the targeted journal guidelines because it varies from journal to journal. The best thing that you need to do is you have to visit your targeted journal, look at the ideal length, look at some of the most cited papers in your targeted journal, look at its length and stick to its length. So although the APA recommends 150 to 200 words, it may vary depending on your targeted journal. Sometimes your journal submission guidelines tells you exactly as to how many words your abstract should be. So better stick to those guidelines. So when should you write your abstract? Should you write your abstract before you write your paper or after you write your paper? But the most accepted school of thought is you should write your abstract at the end of your research. However, it is always a good idea to write a tentative abstract before you write your full paper because it's like a kind of a blueprint that can really help you to expand your paper. So it's always a good idea to write a tentative abstract before we write our paper because as a researcher you know what you are going to write. So it's better to write a tentative abstract. However, you will revisit the abstract later and maybe make some important changes in it. So that's a different proposition altogether. So it's always better to write a tentative abstract first. So how to write? Let's focus on how to write, and let me also demonstrate, show you a sample of how to write an abstract. So to answer the question how to write, the international benchmarking to write a research paper is IMRAD, Introduction, Methods, Results and Discussion. So too, for writing an abstract, it is Introduction, Methods, Results and Discussion. So you need to write 2 or 3 lines each. 2 lines talking about the background of the introduction, 2 or 3 lines talking about the methods, and another 2 lines about the results, and finally about the discussions. So what should you add in every component? What should you write in every component? So we are going to discuss that. So ultimately we have to make sure that after you write your abstract, it should be really flawless. Of course your entire paper has to be flawless, but you have to pay extra attention to write your abstract. So in this video, let me demonstrate how to write an abstract. Let me show you all these components of writing an introduction, of how to write a method, on how to write your results, and how to write your discussion. So let me demonstrate, and through some examples of highly cited papers. So as I said before, let us analyze this abstract. See, this abstract that we have taken for the sample today is chosen from the journal Computers and Education.
It's an esteemed journal in education technology. See, since 2017, this document has been cited 104 times according to Scopus citation details. If you look at the title of the paper, it is on the impact of flipped classroom design on learning performance in higher education. Let us analyze in the light of what we discussed earlier, that is how to write the first few lines of introduction, how to write the method section, how to write the results, and how to write the discussion. Now closely examine the background. The background is highlighted here in yellow. Look at the background. The background, as I said before, is usually the opening sentence that places the work in context. In the introduction, you need to write about your purpose, the outcome, or the key arguments of your paper, and you can also add research questions. So let's see how these authors have written the introduction. Look, they state, the present study examines the differential impact of studying in a flipped classroom setting as compared to blended learning, traditional learning, and e-learning on learning performance, intrinsic motivation, and perceived flexibility. So they have very clearly stated the objective. The authors have stated that they are going to examine the impact of flipped learning, blended learning, traditional learning, and e-learning. It's very clear opening sentence on what they intend to explore, on what they set to explore. And the variables also are clearly stated here, the key arguments. So they are going to test this on the learner's performance, on their motivational level, and their perceived flexibility. So the introduction clearly sets the context. It gives you a very clear opening sentence, the purpose of the study, and what the key arguments are, the research variables. The variables here are motivation, performance, and flexibility. So that is how you need to write a good introduction, an introduction sentence in your abstract. Then let's move on to methods. See, the method section, this section which I am highlighting here till here is the method section, which are in green and blue. Let me go to the method section now. Clearly notice the method section. In the method section, the researcher has to explain what was done. They have to clearly define their approach or the methodology on how they did that, and also throw light on the variables and the procedures. Let us see how the authors have written the methods here. See, the first thing is they are talking about the participants. The participants were the second year undergraduate students. The number of the students are 90 students, n is equal to 90. So they are giving a description on who the participants are, and also say how, in which course they are enrolled. They are enrolled in the invertebrate course in the Can Tho University, Vietnam. So very clearly it gives you the sample description about who the samples are, on which course they were enrolled, and also tells you something about the kinds of sample, whether it is random sampling. The participants were randomly assigned to one of the 4 experimental conditions. So what is very clear here? The description about the participants is clear, and what method or approach they have used. They have used an experimental method because it clearly states experimental condition. So the experimental methodology is very clear here. Samples. What are the 4 experimental conditions here? Traditional learning 22 students, blended learning 22 students, a flipped classroom 23 students, and electronic learning 23 students. So they have very clearly stated the types of instruction, the types of intervention, the types of experimental conditions, and they have also talked about the instruction methods that the authors are going to choose. One is the lecture and the another one is the guided conditioning. So in your method section, you need to clearly state your what was done, what is the approach or the methods that you have chosen, what is your sample size, what is your sampling procedure, and you may talk about the specific procedures if there are any. So primarily you need to talk about the methodology or the approach chosen. So the authors have very clearly stated that it is an experimental approach. Now let us move on to results. See the results that are highlighted in red. See, the results of our study show that the learning performance was superior in the flipped classroom setting as compared to other settings. So the author has compared 4 settings in this paper, and they have concluded that the results are superior in flipped classroom setting, and they have also substantiated that to statistical analysis. They say here Cohen's D for traditional learning was 1.58, for electronic learning it is 1.1, for blended learning it is 0.1, and so on. So you need to state the results with some kind of statistical evidence here. Students in the blended learning had a higher performance as compared to electronic setting. So what does your findings say? Which method is better? So they have very clearly stated that this method is better. So finally, let us come to the discussion, which is highlighted in pink. The discussion should usually talk about the important consequences of your work. So you need to explain what it means without exaggerating. What does your result mean? What is the overall significance of your study? What value does it add to the current research? So you need to talk about the implications in the discussion. Let's take a look on how the authors have discussed the discussion section. See, in addition, we observed that studying in a flipped classroom setting had a positive effect on self-efficacy and intrinsic motivation. So they say that it has a positive effect on motivation and self-efficacy, but not on perceived flexibility. So they have mentioned the discussion, what those results mean, and they also finally end up with implication. These findings suggest that flipped classroom setting could be a promising way to enhance student learning performance. So this is the implication of the study. So they end up with implications. So it is very clear on how the authors have written the background, that is introduction, what they have stated in method, and what they have stated in results, and how they are writing the discussion section. This is how a classical abstract should be. Now, after having seen the abstract and discussed about these components, let us apply it. Let us now apply. Let me apply, take a topic, apply it and show it to you. So now let's apply what we have discussed earlier. Let's just look at this title. Let's say that we are going to write a paper on language learning outcomes in an online classroom versus traditional classroom using self-directed learning. This is just a tentative topic and it's an intervention study. Now we are just going to make a comparative analysis of online versus traditional classroom using the principles of self-directed learning. So it is an intervention study, as I said before. Now we are going to write a tentative abstract. We discussed earlier, the background should clearly set the context for your study. So the background, you should mention the purpose and the key arguments. So let's say that we write this background. Just analyze this background in the context of what we discussed earlier. So it's always better to prepare your abstract in this way. When you chunking is a very good strategy. If you look at the overall abstract, it will be quite challenging. Whereas if you break your abstracts into different components and fill in the respective fields, you can easily write your abstract. Now look at this background. The objective of this study is to evaluate the language learning outcomes in online and traditional classroom. So I have just given you the purpose, the background, the opening sentence. And in the second sentence, I am stating the uniqueness about my work. Although previous studies have dealt with self-directed learning, they have not compared it in the context of online and traditional learning. So the background is set. Now my topic says it's an intervention study. So I have to talk a little bit about the method. We discussed earlier that the method section should clearly state your methodology or the approach. It should also state the procedures you followed and the research variables depending on your research design. See, look at what is highlighted in blue. Let us take it and analyze it in the context of methods. So I am just copying it and bringing it here. Analyze the method. What method is followed or what approach is followed? A pre-test, post-test method was followed in this study. I have two groups for this study. The control group was n is equal to 30. They were exposed to traditional instruction. The experimental group number n is equal to 32. They were exposed to online instruction. So what is the method? The description about the samples. Then I am talking about the sampling procedure. A random sampling was followed. In the method, then I am saying that both the control and the experimental groups were enrolled in the course on public speaking and the performance was measured using a t-test. So this method should clearly state the procedure, on what approach you have chosen, why you have chosen the approach, and it will vary from design to design. This is just tentative. So tentatively you can document it. So what did you find? So you need to mention just 1 or 2 lines about the results. So what does my results say? So what I have highlighted in pink is what my results say. So I will say what does my results state? Results of my study. So the results of my study showed, or the results of the paired t-test at a significance level of 0.5 showed that the experimental group performed better than the control group. So the experimental group has outperformed the control group. So that is what my results say. So you will clearly state what your results say. Now let us come to the discussion. In your discussion, you need to talk about the implication of the results. What does those results mean? Now let me highlight the results in a different color and show you what those results mean. Now I am just copying these results and I am just placing it in discussion. So you can say the results show that the pedagogies of self-directed learning will be useful in the context of online education. The findings is expected to be useful both at the policy level and the pedagogical level. So in the results I shared what is the results. In the discussion I am saying what the results mean and what are the implications of these results and how will my study be useful? To whom is it going to be useful? So you need to end with a bang. So the findings is expected to be useful both at the policy level and the pedagogical level. So you can just create a tentative title like this, and then probably after writing your full paper, as I said before, you can revisit and you can revise it. So this is one of the widely followed strategies or an effective strategy for writing an abstract. In this video, we discussed about some of the prerequisites of writing an abstract. We also analyzed the sample abstract of a highly cited paper from a top-notch journal. Finally, I demonstrated how to write the introduction, methods, results, and discussion for an abstract. I will leave a link of the abstract writing worksheet in the description box. You may download it and apply it in the context of writing your research paper. I hope that you found this video practically useful. Thanks for viewing.